Howdy folks, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles, where, once again, as I'm sure you've probably noticed, I'm on the couch.
With Rita.
With Rita, yes. You've put weight on Rita. Also, you got a lot taller.
Yes, that happens.
Eddie!
Yay!
Yeah, so, we like to do this every now and then.
Yeah.
Instead of just me sitting and talking over some game footage, this has got nothing whatsoever to do with whatever I'm talking about. Every month or so I get Eddie around and we have a chin wag on the couch.
Yeah. People seem to like it.
They do, yeah. And the last time we did this, you'd asked your subscribers for a bunch of questions about both of us. And because you were monumentally crap, you missed the first page or something, didn't you?
Missed the first 2 or 3 pages.
Yeah.
And you know what? I thought, I'll write them all down for this one. And I started doing it this morning and just thought, I can't do this. And I just came here without any of them.
After going to your mum's for lunch.
After going to my mum's for lunch,
But there was one question that we remembered from the first couple of pages, and it was one of your most loyal subscribers who asked it. Can you remember who it was?
No.
Okay. Well, you'll remember when we... you'll know who you are.
You could probably go to my page and look at it.
You'll know who you are when we mention the question. And the question was, because, how long... 20 years we've known each other?
Yes, I met you in 2003.
Yeah, 20 years. On board HMS
Newcastle, yeah.
Yeah. And 3 or 4 years after that, I ended up moving into your spare room and basically taking over your entire upper floor.
Well, you started off in a spare room and gradually took over.
Expanded.
I moved downstairs and you claimed rooms as it went along till you had the entire thing.
Really thirsty. And obviously you can't... We were in that place, well, you still are, but 15 years?
16 years.
16 years. And we're great friends, but there's no such thing as two people who never find anything to get pissed off about each other.
Yeah.
And so that was the question. What is it about each other, if anything, that winds you up? And I think we both knew exactly.
Yeah, and what's worse is we feed off each other, because when you do what you do, it makes me do what I do, which makes you do what you do, which makes me do what I do.
And it's a never-ending cycle of destruction.
So we know when it happens, we need to just...
Yeah, and we know it's happening.
And we can't stop it, either of us.
It's in our nature, we just can't.
Yeah.
So in order to get to what it is about each other that winds us up, first I need to set a bit of context.
Yes.
I think you would agree that we are both probably the laziest people we each know.
Yeah.
But we're lazy in different ways. You see, Eddie's the kind of guy who will cook a meal and then put the dirty dishes on the side. And then the next day cook another meal using fresh dishes and then put them on the side. And then the next day cook another meal using fresh dishes and put them on the side until he's got no dishes left. And now he has to do the washing up.
But I will do it.
You will do it.
Yeah.
But it's way harder.
Yeah.
Because the plate on the bottom of the pile, you now need a blowtorch to get all the encrusted food off it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's lazy in the traditional respect. I'm lazy the other way. I do a little bit of cleaning every day. Because if I don't, I have to do a lot of cleaning every week. So, I will do the washing up, not because I enjoy doing the washing up, but because I know what it's going to be like if I leave it to the next day.
Yeah.
And that's just too much of a pain in the arse. So I'm also lazy, but in a cat in the litter box, that'll be Akazuki. Never work with children or animals. I'll give you another example. My World of Tanks videos.
Yeah.
The intro had a quite high audio level, and that was fine because I've imported the intro into the video recording and editing software, and I'd just dropped the audio level down so it matched the rest of the voiceover and the video audio in the actual battle replay that followed the intro. Should we wait until she's done? She picks her moment.
Yeah, she's really going for it.
She is. Let's give her a minute.
We'll cut this bit out.
We will. Right, Akazuki's finished doing what it is that cats do in litter boxes. She's sitting on the kitchen island at the moment. She'll be calling for attention in a minute. I'm sure you hear her in the background. So what we were... Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, World of Tanks intro. Recorded at quite a high volume level. But that's fine. I just stick it in my editing software and then I'd lower the volume level to match, the audio in the background video and my commentary. And that was fine, but I had to do it every time I did a World of Tanks video, when the simple thing to do would be to just re-record the intro. And that's right, Akazuki, yes, I know, I'm lazy, and I didn't do it. And just re-record the intro with a lower volume level so it matched the rest of the video. But instead I would just, every time I did a World of Tanks video, manually lower the volume of the intro. And that worked until I forgot to do it, and then rest in peace headphone users.
Yeah, that's a bad one.
Yeah. So I think for about a year and a half I did that, until one day I just said, screw it, and I re-recorded the intro. So now I never have to worry about it. But I was too lazy to do it the easy way. So that's me. I'm lazy in that I'm too lazy to bother doing things the hard way. So I do a little bit of cleaning every day, so I don't have to do a lot of cleaning every week. Now, the thing, because the whole point of this subject was the thing about each other that pisses us off, and we knew straight away what it was.
Yeah.
Because when Eddie, for example...
The bin.
Yeah, perfect example. Hasn't emptied the bin in 2 weeks. See, Eddie will, instead of emptying the bin when it gets full, Eddie will just crush it down.
As every good person should do.
To give himself another day. And then, we'll crush it down again to give himself another day until it takes two people to get the bin bag out of the bin because it's been wedged down so tight. And you risk splitting the bag and getting rubbish all over the kitchen floor, when the simple, easy thing to do is just empty it when it needs to be emptied.
Yes.
That's the difference between us. But the thing that pisses us off about each other is when he does something like that. When he hasn't emptied the bin in 2 weeks, for example, and I've had to, I've emptied the bin 3 times in the last 2 weeks, and for God's sake, Eddie, you're putting shit in the bin as well.
Yeah.
Do you mind emptying it? I won't just say, Eddie, you haven't emptied the bin in 2 weeks. Come on.
Because if you did, I'd say, shit, sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
And I would empty it. But what do you do?
I say, Eddie, are you planning on emptying the bin this month?
And I will take offence to that, because I did it 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
So I'll go, but I have emptied it. I emptied it 2 weeks ago.
I exaggerate like a motherfucker.
And then I find a detail that's wrong. Take offence at it.
And you argue
that detail.
Yeah. And you will not let that detail go because you're right.
Yes.
You are technically correct.
But I'm still in the wrong, so I don't feel good about it, and I know I'm in the wrong.
But my issue...
But I'm not prepared to accept that I didn't do it in the last month.
All I had to do was say, Eddie, you haven't emptied the bin in 2 weeks. But no, I'll say, empty, you haven't emptied the bin in months. And he's like, actually, hang on a minute. And I just make it bad from the start by not being honest, because I just always exaggerate. I always exaggerate whenever I'm calling somebody out about something. I never just go out and I know I'm doing it. As the words leave my mouth, I know I'm doing it, I know I shouldn't do it, and I know exactly what's going to happen.
And you can't stop.
But I can't stop myself because that's just my nature. And he immediately, even though he knows I haven't emptied the bin in 2 weeks, he's like, but he didn't say you haven't emptied the bin in 2 weeks. He said you haven't emptied the bin in 2 weeks.
I know, I mean, what I should have said was, sorry about that. I did do it 2 weeks ago, but you're right, that's far too long.
Yeah,
but I didn't.
But you won't.
But I won't. I'll go, hang on, no, I did do it. This is not on. I'm not being accused of something I haven't done.
And it's all my fault because I started the whole thing off with an exaggeration, and that's it. I exaggerate wildly, and he, if you give him the slightest detail that he can argue over, will refuse to admit fault, and he will make it all about the detail that's wrong rather than the issue.
Yeah.
But it's because I don't make it about the issue, and I give him the opportunity to argue the details.
Yeah.
And he knows it's happening, and I know it's happening.
And neither of us can stop it.
Neither of us can stop doing it because we're both as crap as each other.
Yeah, and we end up having to walk away from each other. And we'll come back an hour later and go, look, I'm sorry, you're right, I should have emptied the bin. You're right, I knew you did it 2 weeks ago. I exaggerated and for effect, and that wasn't the point I was trying to make, but I made it the point I was trying to make. And
gave you the opportunity to spend the next 15 minutes arguing about what it was that you didn't actually.
Actually, Jingles, it was 20. No, that's
that's exactly it.
Yeah,
he is the original. Actually, Jingles, man, that is exactly what it is. So That's what it is about each other.
Yeah, that we despise the most.
We do, that just whines.
And what's worse is we know we do it,
and we can't stop.
But to be fair, we don't do it now because we don't live together.
No,
it doesn't come up.
No, exactly.
It is a nice. It's like it's perfected our.
The bin doesn't get emptied now. It's my fault because it's my bin in my house. So, although it does.
I cook for one of my housemates. He always does the washing up from my cooking. So
you don't have the dishes piling up for a week until you run out of dishes?
Oh, we do, but that's due to some other people. I am no longer the problem in the house.
Right.
Some of the other people in the house do that, and that's on them. And now I'm looking glorious.
So you are now blameless.
Yes. Oh, don't get me wrong. They still stack up in my room, the actual plates. But the stuff I cooked with, that's...
Because there was a while, correct me if I'm wrong here, but wasn't there a period of about 6 months when you thought, screw this, washing the dishes every day, and you just bought paper plates and plastic knives and forks?
I would love to say that that's how it was, but it's far worse than that. Basically, when they decommissioned HMS Newcastle, right,
you stole a bunch of
No. I had been given the galley were pissed off for people nicking all the forks for the pot noodles. So they gave me boxes of these plastic forks, and we didn't get through hundreds
I
of
should
them.
lay some context here. Forks for the pot noodles. Eddie was the canteen assistant on HMS Newcastle, so they sold pot noodles and instant ramen and all that sort of stuff. But people kept stealing the forks.
Stealing the forks from the galley to use them. And what do? Do you return it and wash it up and put it back, or do you just throw it in the bin? Because it's not your fork, so the galley was running out. So they asked us to give away a plastic fork with each pot noodle, which was fine. But they gave us thousands of these things. And at the end of it, when the ship was decommissioning, I was like, what do you want me to do with these 6,000 forks? And they said, throw them in the skip. And I was like, well, I'm not throwing them away. Nobody's going to take them back. So I took them home. Because you're right, it saved me doing the washing up. If I just ate my food with a fork, I didn't have to wash up any forks.
Let's face it, most of the food that we cook, you can just eat with a fork, like pastas.
Yeah, in those days, it was all microwave meals. That's before we properly learned to cook.
So you just ate out of the packet?
Yeah, ate out of the packet with a plastic fork. But here's the thing, the person I was living with at the time, because this is before you moved in, he was like, well, they're awful for the environment. I was like, well, they'd already been bought. Yeah. They were going to be thrown away anyway.
They exist already.
I was not going to...
it's not like
I didn't go out my way to buy them.
Yeah, it's not like you went out and made 6,000 plastic forks.
What I did was I gave them a use.
Yeah.
And so obviously when you moved in years later, I still had quite a few left. So that's what I was doing. And so while it looks like I went out and actually bought these...
But you did go out and buy a bunch of paper plates as well.
No, I think they were in a box of stuff that was given to me. And there were these sealed paper plates.
I've got them anyway.
I may as well use them.
So for a while I was the only one actually making dirty dishes because I actually ate with proper knives and forks and plates.
If you're going to be lazy, do it properly. Yeah. I mean, my t-shirt says it all.
If you ever see me jogging, kill whatever the fuck is chasing me. That's a new one, isn't it?
Yeah, that is.
I like that one.
Yeah, it's true. If I'm jogging, there's something seriously bad chasing me.
And he does come up with the best t-shirts. Actually, speaking of HMS Newcastle decommissioning, because we had no idea what we were going to talk about this week, but you stick us on the couch next to each other and we'll talk for hours. Do you remember, because it decommissioned up in Rosyth, in Scotland, just north of Edinburgh.
I'd left the ship by then.
I hadn't, unfortunately. We had to stay on board to do the decommissioning. And here's the thing because this is the Royal Navy for you over and over. Bearing in mind that we were taking a ship in to hand it over to contractors to be scrapped and decommissioned. And in order to get the ship ready to be handed over to be disposed of, we had to clean that ship to within an inch of its life to captain's round standards. We had to spend weeks cleaning and polishing everything, well, not just the mess decks and the communal areas. Everything had to be spotless. Every engineering space, every weapon space, every sensor compartment had to be spotless in order to be turned over to the contractors to be torn apart and scrapped. It was just the most pointless, ball-ache waste of time, but it had to be done because that's the Navy way. So we're doing all of this shit. We're alongside in Rosyth in the dockyard, prepping for decommission. We had to take all the firefighting gear off. All the stuff that the Navy was going to keep had to be taken off the ship. So, like, obviously we got de-ammunitioned in Portsmouth before we sailed up to Rosyth. And then as soon as we got into Rosyth, they started hauling off all of the electrical equipment, all of the firefighting equipment, all got stripped off to be used on other ships. But you still have to have some way of fighting a fire. So the day's duty watch fire party would have this massive dump of AFFF portable fire extinguishers on the jetty. So if there's a fire on the ship, you first had to run off the ship to the jetty to grab a fire extinguisher to go and fight the fire on the ship, because all the firefighting equipment had been taken off the ship in the first place. It was just an absolute bloody nightmare. And then on the final day, the actual, okay, this ship is now decommissioned, ship's company, go home and take leave. We were hoping to get thinned out and sent on leave at lunchtime, but there were just all these last minute little jobs that needed doing. And the XO, Dave Prentice, fantastic bloke by the way, first met him when he was a sub-lieutenant, and prior to that he'd been a chief electronic warfare rating, and then
that explains a lot. He came up through the ranks.
He came up through the ranks. He was such a good man. Finished off as a commander.
I met him as a commander.
But on the Newcastle he was the executive officer and the lieutenant commander.
2.5
ringer. And he wanted to get everybody gone, but he also knew that his job was making sure that the ship was ready to be handed over to the contractors. So there was just all of these last minute rushed jobs that needed to be done so he could, dot the I's and cross the T's and then get rid of everybody. But it just kept dragging on and on and on. And I was on the flight deck. Everybody's bags were packed and ready to go, but we're still in uniform and still running around doing these jobs. And I'm on the flight deck, and the XO was there on the flight deck. And then, and because it was all just this constant stuff that needed doing, one after the other, all over that entire day, we're there on the flight deck, and then I heard, "Do you hear there? XO speaking."
With the XO next to you.
And the XO was standing next to me, and it clearly wasn't him speaking.
Yeah.
And I to this day, I do not know who it was.
Yeah.
But I know who it was, because the only person on board I knew who could do impressions of the XO wasn't on the flight deck at the time. And I knew he'd found a compartment somewhere with a main broadcast. And he was, "Do you hear there? XO speaking. Well, it's been a long, hard road. But the end is in sight. Today is the day that HMS Newcastle decommissions and gets handed over to the contractors. It's been a tough job for all of us. There's been a lot of work, but it's all been achieved to my satisfaction. And after a long, hard day, and we're just waiting, leave reports of daily orders. Everybody can go." But clearly it wasn't the XO. He's standing next to me, and he's like, "What the hell?" So it just remains for me to say one thing. Hands to action stations, assume NBC State 1, condition Zulu. Close all water doors and hatches. Stand by to slip. And the XO fell over laughing. It was so Pincher Martin, I don't know it was you, but it was you, wasn't it? And then, oh God, it was one hell of a day. Half an hour
I wish
after
I'd
that,
been there.
Oh, it was great, because of course once you destocked the NAFI stores, I didn't need you for anything, so you didn't join us for actual decommissioning in Rosyth. But then, because I packed everything, but I had my computer and monitor and everything, and this was before flat screen monitors, so it was basically a cathode CRT TV set. So I had a lot of stuff to take home, and it wasn't that far because I lived in Newcastle, which was only an hour away from Edinburgh by train.
Yeah.
And it was like, get on at Edinburgh, get off at Newcastle, one stop, nothing in between. And I tried to get everything that I needed in one go, but it just wasn't going to work. So I'm going to have to make 2 trips, and they only give you a rail warrant one way. So I was going to have to pay at my own pocket to go home, take as much stuff home as I could, leave it all, then go back up to Edinburgh. It's only an hour.
Yeah.
Well, call it 2 hours once you get to and from the train station and all that. Back to the ship, grab the rest of my stuff, and then home. So that was going to have to make 2 trips. But because it's me, it just never ended up working out the easy way. So I got my rail warrant from Edinburgh to Newcastle with all of my stuff, got on the train, packed all my stuff in the baggage store, sat down, fell asleep, woke up in York.
Wow.
Which is like
A long way down.
long way down the line. Because it's a good job I woke up in York, because the next stop was London.
Wow.
So I ran to the guard and I'm like, oh, this is what I've done. And he was good about it. He was an ex-radar operator, ex-Navy. He says, yeah, no problem. And he gave me because now I had to get a ticket from York back up to Newcastle. And he said, no problem. He gave me a train pass and said, off you go. So what should have taken 3-4 hours ended up taking 8.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know. I'm just crap. And that was how I left HMS Newcastle. I even managed to screw that up. But it was such a good ship.
It was.
I mean, that XO, I said, I first met him as a sub-lieutenant on board HMS Brazen, my first ship during the Gulf War. And he was, I don't even know what job he was doing. I mean, he was a sub-lieutenant. It was a training. Yeah. It was a training. He was filling a training position somewhere. But he wasn't the only, what they call lower deck officers, or SD, from the special selected to be promoted from what they call the special duties list, which basically means you joined up as a rating and then you got promoted to officer from the ranks. Yeah. He'd only just been promoted, so he's a sub-lieutenant, but there was an extremely senior lieutenant on there, Lieutenant Nugent. Everybody called him Ted.
Ted, can't think why.
Yeah, and he'd already been in about 20 years, and he was one of the most senior lieutenants in the fleet, and he'd also been promoted from...
excuse me.
You're welcome.
I've been waiting for that.
He'd also been promoted from, I don't know what branch he was, some type of warfare department branch. But anyway, the two of them, I mean, Dave Prentice, XO on the Newcastle, was a natural-born practical joker.
Yes.
And he would have been bad enough on his own, but him and Ted Nugent kind of egged each other on. And I can remember we're out in the Gulf. It's during Operation Desert Shield, before Desert Storm kicked off. So we're doing, we're intercepting merchantmen, we're escorting ships up through the Straits of Hormuz and all that. And the ship's flight had a new flight observer. So you had the flight commander, the pilot, and FLOBS, the flight observer. Yeah. And they didn't have a flight observer, so one was, you go to war, you need a fully crewed aircraft. Yeah. So they sent us a flight observer, and he must have been 19 years old. 6'4", skinny streak of piss, blonde haired, totally wet behind the ears, and obviously they flew him onto the ship. He joined us at sea. And what normally happens when an officer joins the ship, particularly at sea, is the stewards, usually one of the leading stewards and one of the lads, meets them in the hangar as they disembark from the aircraft. And then they take their bags and they show them up to the wardroom, show them where the cabin is, show them where the wardroom is, and then all the stuff that they need, and then they leave them to it, and so on and so on. So what Dave Prentice and Ted Nugent did was they borrowed the two leading stewards' uniforms. Yeah. And they went down to meet this guy on the flight deck. And rather than being respectful, as an actual leading steward would have done when welcoming a new officer on board the ship, they were like, right, come on then. Grabbed his bags, threw them into the passageway on 2 deck on the main drag, then kicked his bags all the way up 2 deck to the wardroom. Right. And of course, this guy, 19 years old, never been on a ship before, he's only a sub-lieutenant, was just horrified, but he didn't dare say anything. Threw his bags into his cabin, said, right, there you go, skin, and disappeared. And he was horrified. And then he turned around to the XO. But the XO, of course, not Dave Prentice, he was a sub-lieutenant at the time, was in on the joke. Turned around to the XO and said, so, is this normal procedure for the stewards on board? He's like, oh, yes, don't worry, they're two very, very senior leading stewards. We let them get away with shit. And then at dinner that night, walked into the wardroom, sat down, and there are the two leading stewards, still in the leading stewards' uniforms, serving his food and spilling it all over him. Everybody in the wardroom's in on the gag apart from this sub-lieutenant. Oh dear. But that's the sort of stuff he did.
That makes the stuff he did on the Newcastle look actually really quite tame.
Yes, it does. Although the one because you'd think when I joined the Newcastle and then he joined as the executive officer, he's a lieutenant commander. Now he's all grown up. No, not
at all.
Bearing in mind, this is the man responsible for discipline on board the ship. Yeah, captain's right-hand man. We're doing a replenishment at sea, a RAS. I forget what it was. We were stock. It could have been fuel. It could have been food. I don't know, whatever. But it was fuel. It was an American tanker.
Right. Yeah.
So my job as the writer was I was Batman.
Yeah.
I was
did
Batman.
the bats.
Razbats. 2 square paddles, green on one side, red on the other side, and depending on which side you're showing and what you're doing, it signals to the other ship that you're ready for them to be in pumping and the lines are connected and emergency breakaway and blah blah blah. So I'm up there on the top of the bridge with the chief boatswain's mate who coordinates. He's actually in charge of the whole replenishment, but the person who is technically in charge is the executive officer, because he's also in charge of seamanship on board. And we're waiting to start this RAS, and there's no sign of the XO, none whatsoever. So like, where the hell is he? Bearing in mind this is an American tanker
in 2004 as well. That really does.
And this is in 2004. There's a little bit of context there from Eddie, just to. Well, the XO turns up, and he's in an Osama bin Laden costume.
Yep.
Oh my
Running
God.
around the upper deck in an Osama bin Laden
costume while we're taking on fuel from an American tanker.
And did we have a new EWO at the time who was like, "Who the hell is that?"
Yes. Executive warrant officer, also up there, sees this guy walk onto the bridge wings dressed as Osama bin Laden. "Who the hell is that man? Arrest that!" Oh my God, it's the XO. His boss.
Yes, the one of the 2 people on board that can tell him what to do.
Yeah. But that's just the kind of guy he was.
I remember him actually calling a clear lower deck once.
Clear lower deck is when the entire ship's the ship's company, except for the officers, gets mustered, usually on the flight deck, for some kind of big job or a big address or whatever.
Yeah. This was a big address, and the officers were there for it. And he literally apologised to everybody. Because he said, "Got a bit drunk last night in the club, and I was arrested for climbing the walls." And, yep. If any of you had done this, I would be absolutely destroying you at the moment. However, I've only got myself to blame. Sorry about that, everybody. And of course, every time everybody did something wrong after that, they were like, "Can we call a clear lower deck?" No, it turns out they couldn't.
I can't remember where we were, but night leave had been granted. It was somewhere in the Mediterranean. And if you do something wrong and you go in the shit on board a Royal Navy warship, you go to you basically get charged by the regulating staff, the RPO, regulating petty officer, or master at arms if you have a chief regulator on board, and then you have to attend the XO's table, where it's a summary trial basically, with the XO as the judge, jury, and executioner. If you're really in the shit, you go to the captain's table. And if you're really in the shit,
I've got a story about that.
You go to a court-martial off the ship where the captain can sentence you to detention. The XO can't. There's limits to what the XO can do. And if whatever you've done is deemed worthy of a heavier punishment, you'll go to the captain's table. And the captain can sentence you to detention quarters at the Military Corrective Training Centre in Colchester.
Yeah.
Military prison, basically. But most minor offences are dealt with by the XO at the XO's table. So I can't remember the name. Oh, okay, I probably shouldn't repeat the names anyway. We'll say Dave and his girlfriend Jenny. And Jenny was a good girl actually. She was good at her job, hardworking, and pretty well respected on board. But she was also drop dead gorgeous. And Dave, one of the leading seamen, was seeing her. They were boyfriend girlfriend, and they'd gone out wherever it was. I don't know, let's say Limassol in Cyprus, doesn't matter. On night leave, and night leave you have to be back on board by 8 the next morning. And they'd spent the night in a hotel. They'd overslept, and they'd gotten back on board late. Now, Dave wasn't a bad lad, they just screwed up. And the XO wasn't interested in making an example of him. The Master at Arms did. He was like, these are the charges and these are the potential sentences. And, there's the biggest sentence you can give him. And the XO basically stood him up there. And of course, because I was working in the ship's office, I prepared all of the documents for the summary trial, so I was there, just handing out the paperwork for each case as they came in. So I saw and witnessed all of it. So the XO's up there and he's like, right, so what's the story? And Dave's like, I'm sorry, sir, we just overslept. I mean, we obviously didn't intend to do it. They were being tried separately, so she wasn't in the room at the same time as him. And it was, I'm just really sorry, sir. I've let you down. I mean, this is out of character for me. And they weren't they weren't admitting. Everybody knew, but they weren't admitting that they were in a relationship, because that is actually a fairly serious offence. Just being late back on board, the Navy doesn't like it, but you're not supposed to have relationships with anybody on board. So nobody was admitting to it. Both of them were insisting that they were not together that night. They weren't in the same hotel. It was just a massive coincidence that they were both back on board together at the same time, late. So he's spinning this bullshit story, right? And the XO's like, yeah, carry on, do tell, right? Yes, absolutely, okay. So he's not fallen for a word of it, and we're expecting, a fairly harsh punishment here. And at the end of it, the XO just says, "Was she worth it?" Dave goes, "Yes, sir." Okay, admonished, don't do it again. The master at arms was fit to burst. Yeah. Because he knew exactly what they'd been doing. He couldn't prove that they were together, so he was just settling for hammering them for the charge of being late back on board. And the XO just let him off. I mean, he still got punished. An admonishment is still a punishment, but it's basically saying, you're a very bad boy, don't do it again. It's the least punishment you can be given while still officially being punished. I got an admonishment once.
What did you do?
Same thing, just late on board. Slept through my alarm clock, and it was Dave Prentice. RPO, Gus Honeybun. Yeah. Thought, I've got you, Charlton. Ha 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 ha. And the XO just went, fair enough, don't do it again. Admonished. Oh, thank you very much, sir.
Oh, Gus Honeybun. I had a good relationship with him because Docky's always used to come and try and buy duty-free cigarettes from me.
He was the regulating petty officer on board. Well, we had a bunch of different regulators on board, but for the length of time, obviously new ones would come in and relieve the old one who would go off to another job. But regulating petty officer Honeybun for about a year and a half was the senior regulator, Navy policeman on board HMS Newcastle.
Yeah, you'd have Dockies come in and try and buy duty-free cigarettes from me.
Dockyard workers. I have to keep translating.
Yeah, you keep doing it. And
because they sold duty-free cigarettes in the NAFI shop, but only to the ship's company.
And only a certain amount. You're only entitled to 600 a month.
That's right, yeah.
And so what I'd say to them is, but you need to go and get permission from the RPO first. And so I was sending them up to the RPO and
to confess a crime.
And he loved that I would do this because I don't care about those blokes. They're nothing to me, and it shows that I'm doing my job properly.
It shows that you're on the level.
And it also meant that I could get away with other stuff.
And they haven't actually committed a crime.
They haven't committed a crime,
because they haven't bought.
But he loved doing his.
So he would read them the riot act, and they would never try it again. So he was happy because he got to be the big hard policeman, and you were happy because you set this relationship up with him where he knew that you were on the level, which meant that when you weren't on the level,
when our mess got a bigger beer issue than it should, we got away with it. It's just the way it goes. But going back to the court martial. I don't know what it is where the captain calls the entire ship's company to witness someone having done something really bad.
Oh, that's second class for conduct.
Right.
Which is a horrible punishment.
Yeah. Two of the girls on the ship, what they'd done is it's on leave, so everybody's on leave and their duty. And what they decided to do was, rather than go out to the quarterdeck to have a fag, they'd block up the smoke detectors and smoke in the mess.
Ooh.
And they got caught. And they got absolutely reamed. And they basically both got 4 months stuck on board the ship.
Yeah, 4 months second class for conduct. I'll explain exactly what that involves, but you'd rather
explain it now. It will.
You'd rather go to prison, because if you get sent to MCTC Colchester, the Navy used to have its own detention quarters in the dockyard in Portsmouth. But then, as a cost-saving measure, all three of the services basically agreed that they were going to use the Army's detention quarters at Colchester. So
Yeah.
it just became known as MCTC, or Military Corrective Training Centre, because it's not a prison, it's a corrective training centre. It's a prison. But it's pretty harsh there, as you'd imagine. It's a military prison. So to get a sentence longer than 3 or 4 months at MCTC, you have to have done something seriously bad.
Yeah.
But second class for conduct is when you've done something that is pretty bad, but they don't want to send you to MCTC. So what they do is they put you under second class for conduct, which basically means you get no leave at all. So you're on board the ship for the duration of the punishment, and it can last months.
It did.
Yeah. And you don't get paid. You get a small allowance every week to buy toiletries. So toothpaste, toothbrush, mouthwash, soap. That's it. And when I say a small allowance, I mean like £5. The bare minimum necessary. So you've got nothing. Your duty every day. You're getting kit mustered every day, where this basically every piece of uniform and kit that you have issued has to be laid out in precise order on your bunk, and gets inspected every day. Every day when everybody else is having a stand easy, you're having a kit muster. Every day when leave is granted, you're having another kit muster, and you're taking on additional extra duties that will basically keep you going from 7 in the morning till 10 at night.
Yeah.
And this goes on for months. And at the end of it, it's not like 2 months second class for conduct.
They'll decide
at the end of it
if you need another month.
If you need another month. And they can keep doing it. It's absolutely horrible.
This happened. That's the setup for this. So this is one of those stories where I was there for some of it, but not for most of it, because it happened at the NAFI window, where I was serving at. Basically, you've got the RPO there, and you've got the I think it was the EXO, and they're discussing. We've just come into Russia, okay, and it's a rig run.
A rig run is where you go ashore in uniform, which doesn't normally happen, but they're fantastic because everybody loves a sailor. If you go ashore in uniform, you basically
get free drinks
everywhere.
So yeah, all this stuff, and they've given us lots of trips and lots of things to do. Yeah. One of them is to go and visit a farm. Now, as you can imagine, nobody volunteered for this.
Again, I need a bit of context. Whenever you visit somewhere in the Royal Navy, there's usually 2 people designated as the visit liaison officers, and the VLO is usually a junior officer. It's given to them as a leadership task, or if they've worked the junior officers ragged, they'll give it to a senior chief petty officer, just because chief petty officers get shit done. And their job is to organise what we call jollies for the ship's company. So if there's a brewery in wherever we're going, or a vineyard, there'll be visits to the brewery or the vineyard. They'll organise football matches with the ship's company football team and the local football team. They organise stuff, trips, visits, or jollies basically for the ship's company to do.
This one was a visit to a farm, which, as you can imagine, we're in Russia.
Yeah.
This is an incredible opportunity. We're going to see Russia. You don't get to go there very often. I was lucky to get there twice in my naval career.
And we've got farms here.
And we've got farms here. Nobody is interested. And this is going to be looked on as quite an insult. And they're discussing this at the NAFI queue. And one of these girls comes up and said, well, I would absolutely love to go to this farm. Bearing in mind, she hasn't been off the ship in 3 months. Yeah. And they turn to her and look at her, and I hear them go, that's a damn good idea. Yeah.
Because otherwise, the people who have offered this visit to the farm are going to be insulted that nobody's taken them up on it. So great, we'll send the 2 girls on punishment.
15 minutes later, they call a clear lower deck for absolutely everybody on puns, no matter what the punishment is.
Under puns is people who are basically anybody who's under number 9s, any kind of punishment that basically restricts them to the ship.
Yeah. Anybody under punishment is now on this trip.
Yeah. So
no choice.
You're going to this farm whether you want to or not.
It's part of your punishment.
Yes. So they're punishing them by sending them to this farm.
These 2 girls are loving it because,
they
haven't been off the ship in 3 months. They are gagging to get off.
Yeah.
Most of the other people would rather not be doing this.
Yeah, they'd rather be scrubbing toilets.
Yeah. So yeah, and this is where I have to go from other people because I didn't go But basically,
you saw the state of them.
I saw the state of them when they got back on board. One of the girls who was underpumped was literally being carried by several people because what it was it turned out it was a 5-minute tour around this farm, and then in a barn they'd set up this big feast. With lots of vodka to toast with.
Yes.
And in Russia, there's no such thing as I don't drink. If you're offered a drink, you drink it.
Yes.
You know, you don't say no, I'm fine. And you can't be rude to your hosts. And they made 14 toasts with this, each one with a double vodka. And so these girls that were under puns carried back on board paralytic.
Yeah, and remember, you're not allowed alcohol because you have alcohol on board Royal Navy warships. The US Navy's dry, but we get a beer ration every day. The petty officers and chief petty officers get beer and spirits in their mess, and obviously the wardroom has its own wine store.
Yeah.
But when you're under puns, you're not allowed alcohol.
Yeah.
So,
but what could they do?
Yeah, exactly.
They couldn't punish them for being drunk. They did what they were told.
They'd been ordered to go,
and then they'd been ordered to drink. You know, what are you going to do on that one? So yeah, it was. So that was one where the puns didn't quite go the way they wanted it.
They dipped in on that one.
Yeah. Had I known what it was going to be, I'd have probably gone on that trip. But you know, you just don't know.
No. America's always good for that. There's a word for it. I can't remember. There's a word for everything in the Navy. But when you get lashed up by the locals whenever you go on a foreign visit, there's a word that the Navy used for it. I can't remember what it was, but they're usually pretty good. I remember we went to Barcelona and there was a vineyard tour, and it was. I've actually had their wine since. Of Sangre del Torres, the blood of the bull. And the vineyard was it was built in this old monastery, and all of the catacombs underground, where it was just lined with skulls for miles of these tunnels. That's where they stored all the wine. And I remember the tour guide. I can't remember his name. Lovely Spanish guy, because the tour involved a trip to the vineyard, and of course then there was all the wine tasting. We're British. And then after that, they were supposed to take us to this little restaurant in the mountains. Fantastic view. And again, mid-afternoon, food, more wine, British tourists. And this guy was, because, he'd never actually met any British tourists, but he'd watched television, he'd seen British football hooligans, and he knew what the British were like when they were on holiday in Spain in the Costa del Sol and all that. And he was like, oh, fuck. But everybody was perfectly well behaved, and he actually made a point of saying that he was very surprised at how well behaved we were, and he was very grateful for it as well. That's probably because it was a vineyard tour, so almost the entire chief's mess and half of the wardroom were along, so we didn't have any choice but to be well behaved. But we've had some great. I mean, seriously, people ask, would you do anything different? And no, I would absolutely still join the Navy. I just wouldn't be a radio operator first time around. I would go in as a writer, because, well, it's just a much better job.
A question people ask me is, if you'd actually joined the Navy, what branch do you think you'd like to have joined?
Yeah.
Not a fucking clue. I look at all of them, I think, that'd be great, that'd be great, that'd be great. And then I look at some of the negative parts of it and think, I could never do that. Yeah. I could never do that.
Yeah.
I reckon I'd be great as a chef, but I'd hate to do galley sports, and I'd hate to be doing all the peeling of the
galley sports. Oh, this is another one. Bear in mind, I did 22 years in the Navy, and it wasn't until I'd been in about 18 that I realised that galley sports was not actually a recreational activity. So for chefs, it would be like, because our mess was right next to the chefs. We were on opposite sides of this flat. So we were in 2Q port mess, all the writers and stores accountants and the stewards, and all the chefs were in 2Q starboard mess, just right the other side of the ship from us. And we'd have them in for a few drinks and play cards and stuff, and then we would go to them. I was like, "Are you coming over tonight?" "Oh, I can't, I've got galley sports." I was like, "Oh, no, what's this?" They seem to do this every month. And for some reason in my head, I just had this idea that we were playing Skittles or something. The galley sports is actually when they clean the entire galley from the deck head down to the fucking deck, and it takes about 6 hours.
Yeah.
And it's fucking horrible, and they have to do it in their own time, because you can't do it when the galley's being used.
Yeah.
So it basically happens from about 8 p.m. after they finish serving dinner until midnight or later. And it's a horrible job, and they have to do it in their own time once a month. And for 18 years, I thought they were having a jolly in the galley.
Yeah, sounds about right. I have to admit, when I first heard galley sports, I had a similar idea.
Yeah.
But I was disillusioned of that quite quickly. I didn't go 18 years thinking they were having fun.
Have you noticed as well, anytime you walk into the chef's mess, they've got, on the TV, they're watching cooking shows. You ever noticed that?
No, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, Can't Cook, Won't Cook, or Celebrity Chef, or whatever.
Yeah.
They're always watching cooking shows. They're the only branch in the Royal Navy that does that. Because you don't see... I mean, I finish a day's work in the ship's office.
And you don't go and watch Secretaries?
Yeah, I don't go fucking Open University on BBC fucking 3 and, let's watch an accounting show. Let's catch up on some accounting and bookkeeping. No, but the chefs. Also, the other thing I've noticed about the chefs is they're the biggest fannies when it comes to what it is they do. Because they've got all these terms, like, okay, we're going to saute the potatoes. You mean you're going to fry them? Yes. So just say you're going to fry them. We're going to caramelise the onions. You're going to burn them. No. Look, for God's sake.
Oh yeah, chefs can be dicks like that. I remember I was loaned to a ship. I was literally helping them do stores one day, and I went through Scran on their ship, and they've got homemade fish cakes there.
Okay.
And I was like, what's that? And the chef behind there, a little baby chef with an attitude, said, fish cake. And me being allergic to tuna, said, what's in it? And he went, fish. So I went, all right, dickhead, I'm allergic to tuna. Are you about to poison me? At which he went, oh, yeah, sorry, because, it's his job to tell you shit like that when you ask for it. And I tried it
You tried it the polite way.
The polite way.
And you thought he was being clever.
Yeah.
Admittedly, it did sound like a stupid question.
Yeah.
Until you stop and think about it.
Yeah. Maybe there's a reason why I'm asking what is in a fish cake.
Yeah.
Like I hadn't worked out it was going to be fish.
Yeah.
Although, to be fair, with some of the people I work with, I can see why he might have thought I hadn't worked that out.
Yeah, we'll not mention any names.
No.
We'll be here talking for the next 3 hours about some of the dumb shit that people got up to. But I think we've had a fairly good Mingles with Jingles session. We should probably forward ahead there.
I don't think we can call this Mingles with Jingles. We've literally talked about the Navy and nothing else.
Yeah, but people like that.
Yeah, people. Yeah, that is more or less it.
And you've reminded me of a bunch of stuff that I'd forgotten about. So it's always good to have these chats. Anyway, I hope you've all enjoyed it. And hopefully we'll get Eddie back next month sometime.
Or if not the month after.
If not the month after. And I suppose that's good night. I don't know if you can see her over there catching some sun. That's goodbye from Akazuki. It's goodbye from Juicy, who's in the cat bed underneath the camera. Goodbye from me.
And goodbye from Rita.
Goodbye.